Hello and welcome to Close Reading Classic Literature with me, Dr. Octavia Cox. Today I want to consider a seemingly tiny detail from Jane Austen's marvellous novel Mansfield Park, which was published in 1814. It's one of the most wonderful things about reading and studying and examining Austen's texts that details are never irrelevant. Jane Austen is such a highly well-wrought author. Her writing is so tightly constructed, so trimmed of all fat, that even a seemingly tiny, seemingly irrelevant, seemingly innocuous detail can be incredibly revealing about the broader, important themes within the novel as a whole. So, what is the tiny detail that I am looking at today? It's to do with Sir Thomas Bertram's correspondence behaviour, so how he treats his letters and his written communications. And from this tiny detail, that is how Sir Thomas Bertram franks his post, we might think further about what this reveals more generally about his character, about the Bertram family, and about the misuse of power and privilege that underpins the novel Mansfield Park. So, let's get to the analysis. At the beginning of the novel, a 10-year-old Fanny Price is desperately sad because she wants to write to her beloved brother William Price, but feels that she cannot. For a start, she doesn't have any paper. But cousin Edmund Bertram kindly steps in with a plan. She was found one morning by her cousin Edmund, the youngest of the sons, sitting crying on the attic stairs. "My dear little cousin," said he, with all the gentleness of an excellent nature, "what can be the matter?" And sitting down by her, he was at great pains to overcome her shame in being so surprised, and persuade her to speak openly. For a long time, no answer could be obtained beyond a "No, not at all, no thank you." But he still persevered, and no sooner had he begun to revert to her own home than her increased sobs explained to him where the grievance lay. He tried to console her. On pursuing the subject, he found that, dear as all her brothers and sisters generally were, there was one among them who ran more in her thoughts than the rest. It was William, whom she talked of most. William did not like she should come away. He had told her he should miss her very much indeed. "But William will write to you, I dare say," responds Edmund. "Yes, he had promised he would, but he told her to write first." "And when shall you do it?" She hung her head and answered hesitatingly, she did not know, she had not any paper. "If that be all your difficulty, I will furnish you with paper and every other material, and you may write your letter whenever you choose." "Would it make you happy to write to William?" "Yes, very." "Then let it be done now. Come with me into the breakfast room. We shall find everything there, and be sure of having the room to ourselves." "But cousin, will it go to the post?" "Yes, depend upon me it shall. It shall go with the other letters, and as your uncle," Sir Thomas Bertram, "as your uncle will frank it, it will cost William nothing." "My uncle?" repeated Fanny, with a frightened look. "Yes, when you have written the letter, I will take it to my father to frank." Fanny thought it a bold measure, but offered no further resistance. So the seemingly tiny detail that I want to explore is that Sir Thomas Bertram will frank Fanny's letter. But first, let me just explain some Regency context about the postal system. Edmund says, "As your uncle will frank it, it will cost William nothing." In the early 19th century, when Mansfield Park was written and published, it was generally the recipient who was expected to defray postage, to pay for the cost of the postage. And this was an expense that Jane Austen herself, as is evident from her own letters, was very, very conscious of. She ended a letter to her sister Cassandra, for example, rather abruptly in December 1815, and this is when Jane Austen was busily preparing Emma, another of her novels, for the press, and she ended this letter to her sister with, "God bless you. Excuse the shortness of this, but I must finish it now, that I may save you 2 pence. Best love, yours affectionately, J.A." So she's conscious of saving Cassandra the 2 pence. So postage fees were charged not only according to distance, so it would cost more for you to send something from Cornwall to Edinburgh than it would from London to Hertfordshire, let's say, but also by the number of sheets within the packet, within the letter, and sometimes also the weight of the paper of the package. And this is why letters in the period were often what's called crossed. So to save on the costs of the paper, but also on the cost of the postage for the recipient, both of which were very expensive at the time. So crossing was where you would write the letter as normal, and then when you got to the bottom of the page, you would turn your sheet of paper 90 degrees and you would carry on writing over what you had already written. So that's called crossing. So you write one way, turn the paper, and then you cross it. And many of Jane Austen's own letters, especially to her sister Cassandra, were crossed. And that's because both of them, both Jane and Cassandra, were not particularly well off. So they both wanted to save on the paper and they wanted to save on the postage. And you can see a crossed letter from Jane Austen, for example, this one to Cassandra, dated Monday, June the 20th, and that's from 1808. Returning to Mansfield Park, so Fanny is worried about imposing the cost of her letter on William, who will be receiving it. But Edmund generously steps in, telling Fanny not to worry about the cost because Sir Thomas Bertram will frank it. So, what is franking? Well, a frank is a mark or a label applied to a letter that qualifies it to go through the post and to be delivered. In Jane Austen's period, members of Parliament, MPs, had the authority to send and receive letters concerning parliamentary business free of charge, as long as the letter didn't weigh more than 1 ounce. So to authenticate the letter, to frank it, MPs, members of Parliament, just had to put their signature on the address. We are told explicitly in the novel that Sir Thomas Bertram is a member of Parliament. He's a member of the House of Commons. Indeed, we are told in the very same chapter as Edmund's and Fanny's franking conversation of Sir Thomas's attending to his duty in Parliament. Now, is this use of duty here in relation to Parliament ironic by Jane Austen? Because franking post he should not was a dereliction of his parliamentary duty. Of course, on the one hand, it is a kind gesture of Edmund's to help to alleviate Fanny's distress by finding a way for her to write to her beloved brother, William. But, on the other hand, Edmund clearly feels free to misuse Sir Thomas's parliamentary letter franking privileges. Misuse because only letters concerning parliamentary business were supposed to be franked by MPs for free delivery. So even though it is only a very, very tiny example, this abuse of privilege might lead the reader to think more about how Sir Thomas abuses his positions of power and privilege elsewhere in the novel, and equally how free his family feel to benefit from those abuses also. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Remember, if you like what I do here on my channel where I analyse classic literature, then do please subscribe. And if you have liked the video, then do please press the thumbs up button. It helps me out in YouTube's algorithm. And what do you think? Do you have any of your own examples within Mansfield Park of tiny details that you think expose perhaps some of the bigger abuses, misuses of power and privilege shown by the Bertrams?